With respect to the Russia investigation, we treated it like we did with the Clinton investigation. We didn't say a word about it until months into it. And then the only thing we've confirmed so far about this is same thing with the Clinton investigation, that we are investigating. And I would expect we're not going to say another peep about it until we're done.
2 days after Jim Comey's testimony last May, according to the New York Times, an aide to Attorney General Jefferson Sessions, quote, asked a congressional staff member whether he had damaging information about Mr. Comey. The Attorney General wanted one negative article a day in the news media about Mr. Comey, according to a person with knowledge of the meeting. A Justice Department spokesman said the episode did not happen. At the time, Trump was reportedly enraged that Sessions had recused himself from the Russia investigation and that Comey would not publicly say that Trump himself was not under investigation. He fired Comey days later. And joining me now, former Justice Department spokesperson Matthew Miller, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, and former FBI double agent Naveed Jamali. Thank you all for being here. Matthew, I'm going to go to you first. The idea of the Attorney General of the United States sending a staffer to Congress looking for dirt on the FBI director. We've talked about this. You and I have talked about this before, but we talked about it 24 hours ago. But how unprecedented is that? And is it, and I'll come to Joyce on whether it could be a violation of law, but how unprecedented is that, and how disturbed should we be by that?
Yeah, I'll leave the criminal violation piece to Joyce,
yeah.
And just take up the fact that he is the Attorney General, the head of that department, is supposed to be looking out for the employees of that department, is supposed to be protecting them, supposed to be defending them. And in this case, he seems to be acting almost like as a campaign opposition researcher, sending operatives out, trying to dig up dirt on Jim Comey and trying to have them placed into the media. That, I think, is going to have huge ramifications for his ability to lead the department, not just because of this anecdote, but because it is just the latest in the series of examples of Jeff Sessions not doing his job as Attorney General. When the department has come under attack from the president, from Republicans on the Hill, for being political, for pursuing witch hunts, he hasn't stood up to defend the men and women of the department. And now we find out not only has he not stood up to defend them, but he is actually one of the people going out trying to further that narrative, trying to advance that narrative. I think it's going to be very hard for him to lead the career men and women of the department going forward.
Yeah, and Joyce, on the question of whether what he did is not just distasteful, but potentially an element of obstruction of justice. Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, spoke to the Washington Post about this very reporting. And he said the following. He said, that suggests they wanted to build a case publicly to fire Comey. If this was part of an effort to conceal the real motive for firing Comey, that's very pertinent to obstruction of justice. Your thoughts?
Well, one thing that's for sure, Joy, if Eric Holder had tried to do something like this when Jim Comey was his director of the FBI, there would have been calls for Holder's head and there would have been a criminal investigation opened. That said, I think we don't know quite enough about the facts yet to determine whether there's criminal liability. It's certainly possible. Obstruction of justice here would require a corrupt motivation to curtail an investigation. It would have to be a pending legal proceeding. So our layperson's understanding of what obstruction is a little bit different than proving these elements of a federal crime. That's a little bit more technical and difficult. We'll have to watch these facts unfold, but it's certainly worth watching.
And, you know, Naveed, the other element of what the reporting that we're getting on Jeff Sessions, there's a lot on Jeff Sessions this week, but the New York Times reported that Sessions was essentially his recusal, that Donald Trump tried to stop it using Don McGahn, who is his White House counsel. Here's a little bit from the New York Times piece this week. Donald Trump gave firm instructions in March to the White House's top lawyer, stop the Attorney General Jeff Sessions from accusing himself in the Justice Department's investigation into whether Trump's associates had helped a Russian campaign to disrupt the 2016 election. One more bit. Mr. McGahn was unsuccessful, and the president erupted in anger in front of numerous White House officials, saying he needed his Attorney General to protect him. Mr. Trump said he expected his top law enforcement official to safeguard him the way he believed Robert F. Kennedy, as Attorney General, had done for his brother John F. Kennedy and Eric Holder done for Barack Obama. Mr. Trump then asked, where is my Roy Cohn? Of course, Cohn being Trump's former personal lawyer and fixer, a mob lawyer, Senator McCarthy's chief aide, et cetera. What do you make of that? Is that consciousness on Donald Trump's part, in your view, that if Jeff Sessions wasn't there to protect him, that the Russiagate scandal could hurt him in a legal sense?
I think that's absolutely right. Look, Joy, I think the die was cast with Donald Trump when he refused to release his tax returns during the campaign. I mean, this is someone who has gone to great lengths to not be transparent. And you're right. I think as a former CEO, he views his position in the White House as being that of a CEO, where those who work in the White House work for him, not for the Constitution, not for the American people. And I think the concern he probably has, and I think it's a legitimate concern, is as the Russia investigation goes forward, as it starts to look at his behavior and his activity that predates his time in the White House, the time as a private citizen, there's real concern. I think there should be real concern on his part as to what is going to be uncovered. My goodness, a president who is still yet to release his tax returns, that is someone, that is the sign of someone who has something to hide, as simple as that. And I think he really resents and is probably legitimately worried about anyone and anything that is looking into his past and his actions. It's as simple as that.
And Matthew, you have Donald Trump personally interviewing a U.S. attorney candidate. You have him on the record, Jim Comey on the record, saying he asked him for a personal pledge of loyalty. He seems to be trying to position himself to be protected. And it seems to be explicitly asked the Attorney General of the United States to protect him. What does that tell you?
It tells you that he views the Justice Department not as and the Attorney General not as the chief law enforcement officer, the U.S. attorneys not as independent prosecutors, but people that exist to protect him. And I'll say not just to protect him, but also, we know, to go after his political enemies. That's what he sees the Justice Department as, his personal protectors and antagonists to go after his political opponents. He's not interested in the rule of law. He's not interested in the norms that have governed past relationships between the White House and the Justice Department. He wants it to be his political fiefdom that will carry out his orders no matter what the past precedent, no matter what the practices, and no matter what the consequences are for the rule of law going forward in this country.
And Joyce, how concerned should we be at the seeming willingness of the Attorney General to go along with this scheme, to essentially say, okay, he's willing, he seems to be willing in some ways to do Donald Trump's bidding, to go after his political enemies, to investigate his former political opponent, who's now a private citizen, Hillary Clinton. He's not defending the men and women in the FBI. He's allowing them to now have to turn over their text messages, et cetera, to the Devin Nunes, witch hunt against the FBI. Should we be concerned that the Attorney General is a little too willing to go along with Donald Trump's vision of him as his Roy Cohn?
There's so much wrong going on here that it's almost difficult to know where to start. But I can't help but remember when Sally Yates was in front of the Congress for her confirmation hearing to be the Deputy Attorney General, and Jeff Sessions questioned her, and there was this really remarkable exchange where he asked her if she was sure that she would be willing to stand up to the president if he gave her an unconstitutional order. He made her promise that that's what she would do during her confirmation hearing, and yet he himself has been unwilling to deliver on a similar promise on behalf of the American people. He's engaging in behavior that's contrary to the role of the Attorney General, who, as Matt correctly points out, is the chief law enforcement officer in this country, who doesn't do the president's bidding, who shouldn't open cases or reopen cases because the president wants them to go on political witch hunts. The independence of the Attorney General is longstanding, reinforced after Watergate, and seems to be lacking here.
Yeah, and Naveed, very quickly, last word to you. You are a double agent dealing with the Russians. How similar is Donald Trump's behavior at this stage to sort of a Putin-like vision of what the executive does?
Donald Trump is probably the easiest mark the Russians could possibly ever hope to try to recruit. I mean, this is someone who, as Hillary Clinton can be baited with a tweet. And that's what you're looking for. When you're trying to recruit people, you look for someone who can be easily manipulated. And Donald Trump fits that bill to a T. I mean, there's nothing else to say. He is the perfect mark for the Russians.
Matt Miller will be back in our next hour. Thank you very much to Joyce Vance and Naveed Jamali. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. And
Thanks.
Up next, thank you. And up next, how Paul Ryan is changing his tune on the congressional Russia investigation. Stay with us.